Be grateful for adversity, for it forces the human spirit to grow. For surely the human character is formed, not in the absence of difficulty, but in our response to difficulty. October the 31st, the spookiest night of the year. Every night on this day, people gather to celebrate Halloween, as millions of people spill into the streets, decorate their houses and dress up as goblins to zombies to characters from their favourite movie franchise, and everything in between. As it's the custom of the celebration going around the neighbourhood and partying and making mischief, or usually the young ringing doorbells, exclaiming trick or treat for a handout of candy. Pumpkins are hollowed out with faces carved into them, and candles placed into them, for the sole purpose to place them in display. Scary movies are watched. In fact, the time you're watching this, I'll be in the cinema watching the new Halloween Kills movie. But besides all of that, how many know why? And try consider explaining to someone who has no prior knowledge of the day. Wouldn't they think it's similar to a cult? So today we will be looking at the history of Halloween. This is your host, The Unknown Past. People have been scaring each other for as long as there's been a Halloween. But how long is that? Where does it originate from? And why dress up in demonic characters? Is it to get rid of our darkest fears, unlocking the secrets of Halloween? Meaning discovering how it all began thousands upon thousands years ago? So if I was you, lock the doors, dim the light, and enjoy the video as we dig up the real history of this demonic festival. It all began with the Celts. More than 3,000 years ago, October 31st was the day celebrated the end of the harvest season, and it was thought that Halloween originated from the festival called Samhain. The word Samhain translated into modern day Irish to summer's end. The night also marked the Celts' New Year and was considered a time between years, a magical time when the ghosts of the dead walked the earth. It was a time when the veil between the dead and the living supposed to be at its thinnest, also divine of the two halves of the year, summer and winter, light and dark. This allowed the spirits pass through. Families would invite lost ones and ancestors into their homes to share in their celebrations, and to avoid harm from the spirits, especially the ones that have no one to return to, who are filled with pure evil, so they wear costumes and masks to prevent any harm and disguise themselves. Also, Samhain was also a sacred time for settling important matters, like the inauguration of new leaders. The Samhain Fire Festival was celebrated on the Hill of the Collector, and once again people were celebrating at the sacred site. There is a bit of a mystery surrounding Samhain, but we know that the ancient Celtic priests, known as the Druids, built large sacred bonfires in order to honour the dead and protect the living. Animals were sacrificed, and their bones were thrown into a pit of fire. It was from this practice that the name bonfire came from bonfire came into use. It's mentioned that historians say they even wore animal skin as part of their festival. Then the year's harvest was prepared for both the living and the dead, richly shared between those who were less well off. When Christianity arrived in Ireland in the 5th century CE, they believed that Samhain was a pagan holiday, and because of the festivals associated with death, the Celtic people and the Druids were labelled as devil worshippers. In their attempts to wipe out the pagan practices, the Christians incorporating some of the pagan traditions into the Catholic Christian calendar, and that included the festival of Samhain. As the Christians succeeded in transforming the festival into All Saints' Day, known as All Hallows Day, changed by Pope Gregory III in the 8th century, moved from May 13th to November the 1st. The day right after, on the November the 2nd, is All Souls' Day. I will explain later what it is. The day before Samhain is known as Hallows Eve, and eventually Halloween. By the way, Hallow meant holy person. By the 15th century, writings on what had become the widespread celebration of All Saints' Day show it was becoming to resemble Halloween as we know it today. I'm going to tell you a story that has some sort of links to Halloween. This story is about an assassination attempt in London in the 15th century in 1005 on the 5th of November. On this day, a Catholic group tried to assassinate the King James I and his parliament. You must be asking why, and it's a long story, but the king was a Protestant Christian, so was his parliament, which is a different sect belief than Catholic and Orthodox Christians. Moving on, this violent attempt is called the Gunpowder Plot. If you live in the UK, you have definitely heard of it. This attempt of course failed, so because of that, they had to retreat. But a man called Guy Fawkes was unlucky. He was caught with a bucket of explosives. The king and his side won, and to celebrate, they lit bonfires and sang around it. They feasted and drank the whole night on November the 5th. But this wasn't it. They burnt the popes alive, hung them on the walls. Young children, especially the poor, would go door to door with a Guy Fawkes effigy in a wheelbarrow, begging for sweets or money, and this shows a link to Halloween. It's still celebrated in many places throughout England. Moving on, in medieval Britain during All Souls Day festival on November the 2nd, which was used to absorb elements, Samhain, that couldn't be absorbed into All Hallows Day. The poor and those who are in need would beg for food and would be often given salted pastries made from sacred flour and water. These were named soul cakes. In return, they would pray for relatives who had passed away. The young would dress up and go to door asking for goods or even money. In return, they would sing or recite poetry. These traditions were eventually revived in the 19th century America by the Irish and the Scottish migrants in the form we know today as trick-or-treat. Now I'm going to talk about more detailed in depth of the history of Halloween, especially the tradition of carving into pumpkins, where it's come to known as jack-o'-lanterns. Carving into pumpkins is a tradition where you carve into pumpkins and take all the inside access out, leaving a gutless pumpkin with a meaningful face. Their origins are late back to the 17th century, where it all began. An Irish folk tale of a stingy Jack, where it was said to be he was a clever drunk and a con man. He is highly known as a night watchman of the town. He had fooled the devil into banning him from hell, but because of his life of sin, he couldn't go to heaven. After Jack's death, he was condemned to walk between heaven and hell in eternal darkness, constantly wandering the land. He carried a lantern, which was a turnip filled with coal, which had a red-hot ember from hell inside it to light his way as he travelled around the world, still looking to con unsuspecting people. This made the Irish and the Scottish people began carving creepy faces into turnips and placing them on their windows in order to protect themselves from Stingy Jack and other spirits to draw them away. As they travelled to the United States, they continued the tradition in America. They found an abundance of pumpkins, so they used them instead as it was easier to carve. Whether you believe jack-o'-lanterns keep away evil spirits or not, they have become a stable decoration and symbol of Halloween. There is no argument to the fact that the celebration of Samhain has gone through many changes over the years. It appears that it has lost its religious origins. The superstitions surrounding its play little or no party in today's version of Halloween. Despite the demonic backgrounds, it's still one of the most popular holidays in the world. The 20th century would finally see the commercialization of Halloween. By the 1920s and the 30s, Halloween merchandise evolved to pre-made customers for all ages. After the Second World War in 1950s, the economic boom had sweet manufacturers getting on the Halloween specials, thus also including the movies and series like Pennywise and Halloween featuring Michael Myers. In fact, in the beginning of the 21st century, there was an estimate of $4 billion for Halloween. For each year, it increased by 2.3%. And this is your host, The Unknown Past. If you enjoyed this video, comment below, give me your feedback if you wish, subscribe if you're new around here, and for those who celebrate this holiday, Happy Halloween. I shall see you next time.